Hi, Katherine. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Annie.
And we're the hosts of the Big Cookie Podcast. We're joined today with the author of the book Calling in the One, Katherine Woodward Thomas. Hi, Katherine.
Hi, it's great to be with you guys.
It's so great to have you here. So just to start off and for fun, we want to ask you, what's your favorite cookie?
Oh, I'm a sucker for a chocolate chip cookie.
Me too. I
Me
love
too.
a
It-
classic simple.
oh, I know. Just fresh out of the oven. Ooh,
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah, it's really bad. We've been looking at a lot of cookies as our podcast is called Big Cookie Podcast, based off of your sort of sentiment of not settling for just the crumbs and not waiting for the crumbs, waiting for the full big cookie. So that's where we came up for that. So we've been looking
I
at a
love that. I just got chills. Thank you.
Yeah.
We've introduced Calling in the One to our listeners as we've been working through the book. But what do you like to say about your work, Calling in the One?
Well, the book came out in 2004, and I actually just rewrote it. Now, the program is still the same, so you haven't missed anything in terms of the nuts and bolts of the program. But when I wrote the book, it was really the beginning of my teaching career. And I have had the good fortune of working with so many people over these, how many years? 16 years. I think 50,000 people in my classes where I'm actually coaching them. And then, of course, other people have been influenced because the book has sold hundreds of thousands of copies, really largely thanks to you two, I have to say. But I think so. The work has grown quite a bit, and I'm excited about the distinctions that we have really leaned into because I've really gotten very clear about the inner obstacles to love and how to overcome them, how to both identify them and then move off of them so you can create outside of that story, that old story of how love goes for you and how the patterns tend to play out. And so I'm excited that the work is alive. I'm excited that the work has kind of a field around it. I have people emailing me that they just bought the book, they put it on their nightstand and didn't even open it, but three ex-lovers called them to apologize.
Whoa.
I hear things like that all the time. So I want to hear your stories too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That definitely has happened in our process, like different ghosts from the past showing up.
That was definitely something I experienced of just like the second we said, let's read this book, let's see what happens in this experience. Like that weekend things started to happen and I got an ex-boyfriend show up and it was like, well, they are just coming to me and I am cutting ties and clearing agreements and it was crazy, some of the things that I experienced.
Yeah, it was really wild. From reading Calling in the One and through your bio, we obviously know you're a wonderful author, a licensed marriage and family therapist, teacher, and singer-songwriter. I'm a performing artist. Danielle is a singer-songwriter. We're both kind of performers and of that
Wow.
creative ilk. So we were curious, can you tell us more about your creative pursuits and how those influenced your work as a therapist and a writer?
Oh, so much. I mean, creativity has been so woven into my own journey. I became a therapist really from the inside out because I had a lot of toxic relational patterns. I just had a lot of challenges internally. I had addiction. I had a very bad food addiction. So in my 20s, when I was starting to go into the 12-step program and really try and recover from that, which happened when I was about 25, I started the addiction when I was 14. I started singing. That's when I really started singing, and it was the creativity that helped me to move grief out of my body and to express things I hadn't been able to express. Creativity also played a role in becoming a therapist, the decision to become a therapist, because as kind of a natural progression, one of the principles I really believe in is if you want to manifest something for yourself, give it to others. Make sure
Mhm.
that others have it, right? So that's always been a part of my healing journey. And at some point when the eating disorder really disappeared after 12 years of very intense work. I was so grateful. I said to the universe, I just said, well, what can I do for you? Like, what can I do for the community? How can I say thank you? Because I felt like I'd been given my life back. And what I did is a project called In Harmony with the Homeless. I actually created it, and we went down to Skid Row and started running singer-songwriter workshops with people on Skid Row, bringing in professional songwriters to co-write with them. And that's when I discovered that I had a gift now for healing others, that I had done so much work on myself. And then I went back to school, and I decided to, formally get all of my credentials and all of the training. But again, just writing the book, I'll tell you what happened. I'm also the creator of Conscious Uncoupling, which came because after Mark and I were married for a decade, we decided to get unmarried, which was, a pretty risky decision given that I was the queen of calling in the one. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of pushback and a lot of feelings about that. And it was, breakups are never easy. It was a very tumultuous time. And, but the thing that was kind of the saving grace about all of it is how elegantly we chose to do it, how well we chose to do it. That then became Conscious Uncoupling. But when a few years after that, when I decided it was time to call in the next one,
Yeah.
I went back, and what I did with the CD that's out now, which is called Lucky in Love, and it's out on iTunes and Spotify, and it went onto the Billboard charts. It was #1 on iTunes in the jazz category. But what happened is I met these beautiful men from Australia, the Corin brothers, who are now formerly known as the Kin or the Braves, or now they have a CD out, San Francisco, which their little girl Willow named for them, their 4-year-old. But they're brilliant guys, and they really believe in bringing out the unsung song in each of us, whether we're musicians or not. But I actually decided to create a CD that was like my vision board. So I'm going to weave the future into existence by creating music. And so just like we would do on a vision board, this is the future I want to create. What I did is the first part of the CD is about breakup. Then it's about coming back into forgiveness, and then a consciousness of possibility, and then starting to date and early stages of relationship. The one song I couldn't write was the Having of Love song. I got stuck on it because even though I'm the queen of calling in the one, like, all of us get stuck in non-possibility.
Yeah.
So, and I know at this point enough to not wallow in that place, but to reach out to somebody who can really hold consciousness and possibility with me. So I reached out to Isaac Corin, who is one of my co-writers. And I said, Isaac, I'm just stuck here, and I see it's my own non-possibility, like how this might feel. And he just talked me through it. And by the end of the conversation, I got off the phone and I was able to write these lyrics. Sitting by the fire on a Saturday night, reading David White by the flickering light, I look up and you're smiling. It's only been a year since the night that we wed, when we danced till dawn, then lay flowers in our bed as the sun started rising. And then I went on to write the rest of the song. But it was really like, this is what it looks like, a day in the life. And David White, for those of you who don't know, is a beautiful, prolific poet, gorgeous man. And I met my Michael, because Danielle, you have a Michael. I met my Michael just a few weeks later, and I didn't title the song. We recorded the song, but I didn't have a name for it. Nothing felt right. Met Michael, and within just a few weeks of knowing him, without knowing the song or anything, he sent me a David White poem. And that's when I knew. And of course, the song is now called Michael's Song, and it's on the CD. And so I think that, I think what we're talking about with calling in the one is that life is a creative adventure, that there is no fixed future. There's karma that's kind of going in one direction. There's patterns that goes in one direction, but we have the opportunity to influence the future. That when we take a stand for something, we declare a future that's not going to happen unless we actually stand for it and begin to co-create it. And when we do that, that what happens is that we begin to grow into the people that we would need to be in order for that future to happen. That's actually what happens when we declare that future. That future begins to take on a life of its own. It begins to have momentum, and you'll start to hear, if you're listening, in your soul, in your heart and soul, the ways that you need to grow in order to meet that date with destiny, and also what you need to get rid of in your life, what is no longer appropriate and no longer serving you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think as artists, we actually were asked a question from one of our listeners: how has reading Calling in the One changed your art? And I'm not sure that I'm not making a lot of art now. Like, our project has been the podcast,
a sort of outlet, yeah.
but it's really interesting to hear you say that in your you wrote songs. Your songs became your vision board, because something I learned working through the book was that I was part of my negative patterns and my negative behaviors were wrapped up in my songs. I was writing songs about sadness and loneliness and heartbreak, and never the hope of something new. So that's cool to even use what we do to bring in.
Well, I think this is a really important point, what you're saying, Danielle, because it's, I think that's common. And we have to remember that what we focus on grows.
Yes.
So there is, and I say this as a psychotherapist, there is a time to grieve that's very important in our journey. We do not want to skip over that time. There are things to be angry about. There are things to be heartbroken about. But at some point, the answer to our lives working is not in the past. Who did what to me when, why they did it, how I feel about that, why I'm screwed up now, connecting the dots. If we stay in that, what we're doing is we're reinforcing the traumatized self that we formed in response to whatever was happening. The I'm alone self, the I'm not wanted self, the I'm not safe self. But if you lean into the future, you say, what am I actually committed to? And you start to feel into that future. You have to ask yourself, who am I in this future? Right? Dr. Joe Dispenza says, don't tell me about your past. Tell me the story of your future.
That's wonderful.
And to start to allow the future we're standing for to define who we are today.
Yeah.
And that's really calling in the one. And there's development. One of the reasons why we keep going over our patterns over and over is because there's missing development. If you were left alone in your home as a child, you were raised by a single mother who was distracted and overworked, well-meaning as she was alone, she felt alone. You were left alone. Maybe you came home to an empty home every day after school. So it crystallized as an I am alone self. And inside of that, what you didn't learn was, how do we navigate conflict between two equal adults? How do we do that? Missing piece. So what you do, then you become an adult, you're afraid of conflict, because inside the I'm alone, everybody always leaves too. That's the corresponding belief about others. And then you say, well, I'm not going to, I'm going to avoid conflict like the plague, because that's the beginning of the end. And essentially, in order to be in a long-term relationship and avoid conflict like the plague, you have to self-abandon a lot, which means you're leaving yourself alone. You're becoming a bit of a shell of a person. You're inauthentic in the relationship. So you've now left the other person alone because they're in relationship with someone who's not really sharing, not really bringing themselves forward. And studies show that relationships bond by working through conflict.
Yeah.
Right? So the missing development here is, how do I work through conflict? Well, luckily, we're all lifelong learners. And once you identify that, then you can see, oh, okay, I have to learn how to do this in order for this to go differently, to create a different story.
We both had different challenges and experiences working through the book, and therefore different outcomes. Like Annie found the love of her awesome dog Lizzo, but she found that her something she was really working through was battling depression. And I think you might have felt like your experience was maybe
stunted by some other sort of challenges going on. I mean, it also helped to be doing the book in while battling depression in a sense, because it was giving me something to focus on and sort of challenging me to think bigger. But I think this is in the podcast where I say one morning, I'm like, calling the one, can I call on some pants and get out of bed today? Like, just like that little thing, or that thing of feeling like there's a bigger obstacle in my way to looking for a relationship right now, and that is really working on the relationship with myself. So I guess what we're wondering is, like, could you speak to the various outcomes of this process?
Well, I think people get to the end of the book and they say, oh, I get it. Calling in the one was calling in myself.
Yeah.
Because you're right about that. Mm-hmm. That in order to, be with somebody else, that it starts with how we are with ourselves. So I'm, grateful you got there. And I'm also grateful you're bringing up depression. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about whether it was situational depression or if this is something that is a kind of a lifelong struggle or has been up to
a lifelong struggle, and situational. I had gotten out of a relationship recently, and I think I was sort of coping with a lot of the grief of that and transitioning. I moved back. I was living in beautiful sunny Alaska for 2 months, and then I moved back to the Midwest. So it's just, I'm just a highly sensitive person. So I'm triggered and affected by a myriad of things.
Well, I think if you were getting out of a relationship, grief is not something to skip over.
Yeah.
We're relational creatures. We have hearts that love, and when a relationship ends, we will feel sad about that, and we will need to go through a period of grieving. Where we get into trouble is that we will very often make meaning of the breakup that goes back into an old wounded story. Mm-hmm. And I think the story of depression is a deep aloneness. I am alone, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we really are kind of creatures that are we're designed to be interdependent. And if you were really all alone in this world and you'd never really be able to get your needs met and everybody would always leave, that would be something to be really depressed about. So we will take very often the end of a relationship. I think we do it even if we're the ones who leave, because it's funny, feelings are kind of irrational, and if we leave, very often it's because the other person wouldn't do what we needed them to do to stay, so it occurs still as a rejection. I think very often it's easy to slip into an I'm alone story. And I think the heart of depression is that. So one of the things that I've been developing over these years is being able to just name the story we're in. And the beliefs are in the body. They're not like a cognitive, even conscious things. Very often beliefs were created before we even had language. So they live like an energetic in our bodies, like a heaviness or like an anxiety. And so to be able to put a language to it and to be able then to say, like, okay, what is this? Where is it in my body? If I was going to give it a mouth, what would it introduce itself as? I am what? Like, if it could talk, I'm all alone here. I can't count on anybody. Nobody's ever going to be there for me. And I can never get what I need, no matter how hard I try. That's the story. And then you have to say to yourself, honey, how old are you?
I'm 36.
Yeah, but I'm modeling what you're asking your body. But that part of you that might be like susceptible, vulnerable,
Yeah.
Depression. How old is she?
Hmm.
How old is she?
Oh, well, I mean, she's an immature baby. That voice
She's
is.
young. She's a young,
Yeah,
gentle.
she's a young
She's
thing.
really tiny. She's really tiny. And it's pre-verbal. The moment you put language on it, you kind of have it a little bit, you create a little bit of distance,
Hmm.
Mm.
and you can remember, the Annie that is incredibly developed and loving and educated and smart and kind and has tremendous love to give. And even the Annie that is loved by people,
Hmm.
because you have people who would just do anything for you, right? So you remember that part of you, and that's the you that in your mind, you imagine that you can go pick the baby up.
I love that.
First thing you say to her is, Angel, you're not alone. I'm right here.
Yeah.
I've got you.
I'm crying.
I
Thank
know,
you,
I am
Katherine.
too.
That's a really neat exercise.
Yeah. And you have
I'm gonna remember
experience as an
that.
Annie, so you're a good you're a
That's
natural
true.
caregiver.
Yeah.
Care for yourself.
That's right. Care for
Yeah, and to do that for yourself. There you go. Like you'd know how to do it for Danielle, right?
Sure, sure.
Is it Danielle or Daniela?
Danielle.
Danielle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
We were also doing the book in the winter, in the Midwestern winter, so lots of dreary days, cold, and we joked often that it would be much easier to do this in spring when the
Yeah.
sun was shining, and if we had waited till the spring, we would have been going through the bizarreness of COVID and quarantine and
Oh.
like struggling with that. So have you noticed a change? I know you're still working with clients and doing seminars. Have you noticed a change now that we as humans are going through this pandemic?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's interesting. I just did a workshop, a Calling in the One workshop. That was a 3-day virtual workshop. And I have to tell you, I have never been with people who were so present and so deep
Wow.
so quickly. It was a joy. We were able to do so much together in 3 days because of the enforced slowdown and stillness and get real. This is, we always hear about, people had a near death experience and it was the best thing that ever happened, or they got cancer, it was the best thing that ever happened. When we go through crises, there is an opportunity at the level of soul to go deeper, to go to those next levels. So I'm really seeing people take this opportunity now in a way that's very moving to me. And I'm also seeing that the relationships that form now, because people are still dating, they're dating virtually. And then if they want to meet somebody, they're doing creative things like, well, you get tested, I'll get tested, then we'll come together, or we'll do social distance dating, that kind of thing. But it's almost like being a throwback to 100 years ago when you had a chaperone and you had to take things slowly and you couldn't bond the relationship too quickly through sex, trying to be close through sex. You actually had to be emotionally present, emotionally available, really get to know somebody, take some emotional risks, and bond the relationship for real. So I'm seeing people go deeper, be more authentic, and I am seeing couples get together, which is the good news.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that is the neat thing about this time, and that we hope for our listeners and your readers will pick up the book right now while there is sort of this introspective time where things are shut down and there isn't as much distraction, where maybe you can take some time for yourself
yeah.
and set some intentions. I think it's a really ripe time for that if you take advantage of it.
Yeah. Let's talk about me.
Yeah, let's
It's my
talk
time.
about
It's my time to shine.
Danielle. So Danielle's experience finding a romantic partner was really magical for us. It was like the day we ordered the book, we talk about this in the podcast, the day after you got the book in the mail almost,
Yeah.
you met someone and very quickly clicked with him, and then we met up, and she goes, I kissed someone just to make our schedule for doing this whole project. She said, I kissed someone. I said, you're winning. I was like, you're doing it already. So it was like she almost set the intention in process like clockwork. What we wanted to ask, like, what are some of the most exciting stories you've heard from readers of the book, and what makes you feel proud of your work?
Well, I think what excites me is that the people who feel least likely to find love do. So I think we all have our reasons why we think love is for other people and not for us. Right. So Anna, you're going to have, oh, well, I have depression. So that's, that makes it harder for me. Who wants to take that on? Right. And for me, I have some folks in my family who need extra care and challenges. I have a brother who's disabled, who needs a lot of attention and might come live with me someday. So I had that going on, plus my age the second time around, or even the first time around when I was in my early 40s, right? So we have, we just have all sorts of reasons why we think it's going to happen for other people. Debt, or my thighs are too big, or I have, crazy twins who take so much attention, or I don't make enough money, or all sorts of, or my crazy family, like whatever the reason is, or I have that scar, but here's what I've learned over the years. None of that matters. None of it matters. That love actually, the grace of love is about taking on the burdens of each other. That's really the grace of love. That's what love is. It's not about being a perfect person. It's about being met in your own humanity and seen for who you are, and someone extending their heart and their support and their, their whole their whole their whole psyche and soul, and saying, I'm right here for you, exactly where you are, and let me help you with that, and let me carry that with you. It's quite beautiful. So I think, and what that looks like, or I've had, I had one woman who, the way she did herself, she was like in her late 60s, and the way she did herself was almost very nun-like. She spoke in a little squeaky voice, and she looked down, and she had very cropped gray hair, and wore those little, almost like nun shoes, and could it work for me? And I said, yeah, it could work for you. And don't you know, through calling in the one, like, what do you love? What's your life about? What do you care for? What risks can you take? She joined a poetry group, started writing this, very heartfelt poetry. There was a man there. He wrote his poetry. He was kind of awkward and shy too. And they fell madly in love through their poetry. So I just love things like that, because we just have all these ideas, like if I've been alone for years, or if I'm of a certain age, or if I'm just not, the most sexy thing on the planet, or and it's not really real. It's really about taking a stand and creating a life that we love, and getting into alignment and integrity with ourselves. And look, there are also, Annie, I'll just tell you, there are seasons of love, and then there are seasons of solitude.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And if you are in a season of solitude, you can still hold possibility in your heart and use that time really productively. Like if you knew this was the last time you ever got to be in solitude,
Yeah.
there's a different relationship to it. There's like a preciousness to it. So solitude is different than loneliness. Solitude means you're really with yourself. Loneliness means you're alienated from yourself. So the goal when you're in a season of solitude is to connect with yourself more deeply, and connect with what you're here for, what your purpose is, your circle of love, the people that you love. A lot of us are suffering because we're kind of withholding our love until we meet that one special person. No, love everybody.
Yeah.
Love your plants. Love your dog. Like, love your neighbor enough to go and, leave some food on their doorstep. I baked some extra cookies. I thought you might want some.
Yeah.
Just just be out there giving your heart, care about what, care about the people and the things that life has given you to care about. And if you can't care about people, care about causes, care about justice.
Absolutely.
You've got to give your heart to something. You've got to live with an open heart. And Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, the one thing I remember from that, lovely book is, because I think he really got this right. He said, the secret to happiness is an open heart. Period. It's not having the house you want or the job that you want or the money that you need or being out of debt or having the perfect body or the perfect lover. It's about having an open heart. And that's something that we can all set an intention for and start to live into and value and cultivate and create a lot of happiness for ourselves and others in the process.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that resonated with us from the book was the concept of universal love and observing it everywhere and feeling it and giving it, whether romantic or not. And that seeped in slowly for me. I think you picked up on that right away, but that seeped in slowly for me because one of my issues, problems was resentment and jealousy and anger towards people who had love. So I was seeing people happy and being mad at them and cursing them in my head. And I really had to look back and go like, oh, whoa, I need to appreciate that. And I think it was even something you said, Annie, of like, people, they have that, which makes it even more likely that I could have that too. So like I should be happy and celebrate that success because that means that there's even more of a chance that I'll get it someday. And that's a big thing that I let down, is like anger and jealousy, which I still work on a lot constantly, but that was one of them.
Good for you. And one of the ways that I really encourage you to work on that is to just ask yourself, when you find yourself feeling that way, what am I assuming is true?
Yeah.
And what might be more true instead?
Yeah.
How old is the part of me that's inside that story? Right? With compassion, because obviously something was happening where you felt really deprived and you saw somebody else getting what you wanted and you had no means of getting that in your little person state. So it's and then again, directly, I'm right here, sweetie. I'm right here. What do you need from me?
Yeah.
I love you. You're safe with me. Right? So you're just always internally with that younger you. What happens in relationship is that we do very often emotionally regress back to that younger self. And unless we already have the practice of handling him or her ourselves, what we do is we start to move into, instead of having a partnership, we're making our partner our parent. And we'll start to kind of play out the old story with that person in a way that it very often will set that person up to hurt us in the ways that we were hurt as children. And whether that's an actual thing or whether that's an interpretation, I'm not sure. And it's just human. I still have it. I'm with my partner Michael, and and I realized, oh, I think Michael is mad at me today because my mother was always mad at me. She was like a teenage mother and she hated that I was born. So she's just mad, 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 mad. That was her base ground. So when I get vulnerable, I just assume everybody's angry with me, just mad. It's like the air that I breathe. But I know it now and I can see it. And I say, oh, you're assuming Michael's mad at you. Well, actually, I don't think he really is. And I think if he is, he'll tell you, but I don't think he's mad at you for anything. It's okay. You're fine. I'm not mad at you. I love you. Nobody's mad at you. You're okay. So I'm just happy. I'm just being transparent about just what happened this morning, just sitting quietly. Oh, I can see that story is there. And it's an interpretive lens. See, here's the thing about that. If I stayed in that interpretation, likely I would do things to start to make him mad at me.
Oh, yeah.
right? Because this is how we're the source of our own experience. So we have these filters, and maybe I would start hiding from him, or I'd start, you know, I don't know, withholding something or hiding or being inauthentic. And then he might start to feel uncomfortable. And then he might feel like I'm not really there. And where did I go? And then he's upset about that, right? So there's a way that we actually create our own experience from where we're centered within ourselves and what we're projecting onto people. So a lot of calling in the one, this is all the stuff that opened up in calling in the one, because what I was looking at, we're looking at what are the contracts we've made in the past with people? What are the resentments we're holding on to where we're still victimized and we're not taking personal responsibility in a way that would have us feel safe that we will never do that again? Or the ways that we're giving our power away that kind of trains people to be disrespectful. But the core of it is, who's the I and I love you? What's the self I formed as it relates to whether or not love is possible for me on a very deep level? It's what we call, in calling in the one, your love identity. And most of us have a very false love identity. Like for me, in this story, it's an identity of I'm bad. I'm bad. And other people are mad at me. So that's the kind of relational aspect of I'm bad. Well, how do I show up inside of I'm bad in a way that actually creates evidence of that? So we have to wake ourselves up. Well, what's really true? Well, all of us have the potential to be good and to be bad. And, the deeper truth is that I consistently choose to be a good, honorable person and to make amends when I make a mistake, which allows me to really own that I'm actually a deeply good person and I care about goodness and I'm devoted to goodness and I'm certainly doing my best to be honorable with Michael. That's actually the truth.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to wake ourselves up all the time, is what I'm saying. And certainly if you're going into a dating situation, it's such a vulnerable situation. And if you get rejected or you get ghosted or, someone who you were hoping is the one turned out just to be someone, not the one, you know, these are disappointments, and disappointments fast track us very often into that false meaning. So we have to stay very, and in order, and neediness is when you have your needs on top of a false belief that I can't ever get what I want. It's that very often we will shut down our desires and then try not need anything from anyone because God forbid we're needy. But it has to start with consciousness where you say, well, what's really true? Well, I'm worthy of love. And I have the power to create healthier, happier relationships moving forward than the ones that I've had. And I am given the gift of being able to influence the future. And I'm a stand for love for myself. So that's what's really true. And how do I show up from there in a way that, when I'm on a first date, if very different, like, do you love me? Do you love me? Because I'm not really worthy of love, or I'm going to try and prove I'm worthy of love, from just being centered in, I am a woman who is worthy of being loved. You're going to be, it's like, it's just, it's very sexy. It's very magnetic, actually, to be in power center.
Yeah, it is. I love that.
And then you feel what you need from there. And that's just, well, I need someone who gets who I am, who is loyal, who has integrity, who shows up. That's what I need. It's kind of enrolling, right, from that place. So it all starts in consciousness. That's why I've rewritten the book, because I've just gotten a bit more specific about it. You can see how much the work has grown. So it's not a different program, and the way that the book is now is awesome. But the new book comes out in the spring, and we're taking a bunch of folks through the the new program, as I've created the new 49-day program starting September 8th. I don't know if this will air before that, but we have an in-depth study and coaching collective, because I'll be there and my coaches will be there, and we'll have people going through the new manuscript and doing it all together. So
That's
your
excellent.
listeners are welcome to check that out.
Yeah, we'll definitely send them on to that. And I saw you have, I believe, a life coaching training this weekend, and that you're doing these online seminars. What can someone expect from the seminar? I mean, it's obviously jammed packed into 3 days over 49.
Well, we don't have this, no, that was last month, so we don't have a 3-day, but we do have this 8-week program coming up in September. And then in November, we start a coach training, which is a 6-month journey, because I partner with coaches around the world and, empower them and credential them to be love and relationship coaches using the Calling in the One work. And so it's really a wonderful program. And you get to do your own work, because I'm a firm believer that we have to be living the work in order to really transmit the work. It's, the Calling in the One, as you guys know, is very rigorous, because basically what I'm saying is leave victimization outside of the room. 100% responsibility. That's the starting point. How am I the source of my own experience? So that means that we're no longer, looking at men are like this, or the dating culture's really screwed up, or my parents messed me up. Like it's all about how am I creating this pattern, because that's where you get the power, access to the power to do it differently. So I require that my coaches are living that question, are inside of that themselves, because it wouldn't really be right for them to be saying, well, okay, 97% is the other person's fault, but what's your 3%? Let's talk about that, right? So, because that's where things are going to change. So, so it's a pretty vibrant community.
Yeah, that's great. And do you notice with people you work with, even those who are willing and wanting to be life coaches, do you see and observe some resistance? Because I think we even had that at first. It took us a while to work ourselves into it and really open up. Do you experience that a lot when you work with others?
Yes, and it's a delicate thing, because here's the thing, we have been victimized, right? If we're upset about what we didn't get when we were kids, like, yeah, that's something to be upset about. Like if your parents messed up, or your older brother was mean, or, and your mother ignored that and didn't come to the rescue, or if your boyfriend cheated on you, there's things that like really happened. Somebody lied, somebody did something unethical. So it's not that, and I think it's hard for us, because sometimes we're so hardwired for fairness that we'll carry around that grudge as though it's justice wanting to happen. Like, well, if I just let it go, then what happens? So it takes a great deal of faith to do it, because you kind of have to say, well, yes, that did happen. And I'm going to leave everyone to their own karma, and I'm going to focus on me. And I'm going to let the universe just kind of play out whatever the universe is playing out with that person. I don't need to be the one punishing that person. I mean, I tell a story in Calling in the One that I think has a beautiful message about this forgiveness and letting go of victimization. I mentioned the In Harmony with the Homeless project before, and I had done that project with a gentleman named David who I had a very kind of complicated relationship with. And we were both very, very devoted to the project, in love with the difference we were making. We did it for 5 years together. But on a personal level, our relationship was very push-pull, very kind of in and out, a lot of drama, trauma. And basically, I played out that scenario where if you're in the room, then the other person leaves, and then they come back and you leave. It's just, and we pretty much did that for 5 years. So it was extremely painful. And I couldn't figure out how to leave the relationship but keep the project going. And then my worst case scenario happened, and the project ended up dying. Like he kept the project when I left him, and then it was dying for lack of activity. He did nothing with it. So it was really painful, and I was really angry. And I was meditating because I had declared in calling in the one, it starts with a kind of unreasonable intention. I'd set an intention to be engaged by my 42nd birthday, and I'm 41 at the time, no prospects for a husband. But I started to live into that intention as though it were real. And I realized I don't want to bring this baggage into that relationship. I just don't want to bring it. It doesn't belong to my next person. I've got to clear it. And I went on a meditation retreat, and I'm wrestling with it. And I couldn't get over it. I couldn't let it go. I was so mad. And I got up from the meditation cushion. I walked outside. It was over New Year's, so it was kind of chilly, and the even in Southern California, and the leaves were all off the trees. And I looked up, and there was a beautiful full moon, and I started praying, and I was really struggling, and I kind of felt, I'd been meditating for 2 days at that point, and I kind of felt transported into a different realm of existence. And I felt like I was surrounded by like a host of angels, and they spoke to me, not like a physical voice, but just as this deep knowing. But what they said was, you are right. A great debt is due you. But if you continue to hold on to him as the one who's going to give you restitution for the debt, you're blocking us from being able to give you your due. And that's when I just said, okay, I'm going to let it go. And it was not long after that that two things happened. One is immediately I started to see my own part, my own 3%, which turned out to be a bit more than 3% actually, because I realized that from the very beginning of that project, I had such little belief in myself, and I had so many self-doubts that I actually, without knowing him and without negotiating anything from my own, I brought my idea to him, and he liked it. And so I just made him a 50-50 owner right off the bat. And then we did the whole thing on his computer because I didn't want to be bothered with the admin. So I saw like, oh, you just gave your power away out of not believing in yourself. You just gave it away. You didn't even negotiate an exit clause for yourself. You didn't give him 49%, you keep 51%. Like there's a million ways you could have done that, but I didn't do it. And then I just kind of, ignored a lot of how that was happening, that he ended up getting full control over it. So I had to see that clearly, and frankly, it changed my life to see that was the outpicturing of devaluing myself. The other thing that happened is that blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing came into my life on every area and every domain. I met Mark, who I ended up marrying the next year. I got pregnant the organic, natural way when I was 43 or 42, and then gave birth to our daughter at 43, came into some money, brought my dream home, wrote a best-selling book. Like the whole thing happened inside of that. So, I like to tell that story because I think we are hardwired for fairness, and sometimes it's hard to let go of being a victim. But if you're really committed to manifesting a future that's different than anything you've ever known before, it will take your willingness to begin to align with that future and live into that future. Years ago, before I ever wrote any of this, I went to a seminar that Carolyn Mace was giving. And I do remember one beautiful thing that she said in that seminar. It was a weekend seminar. And she said, it is the natural order of life for us to manifest miracles all the time. And the reason why we're not doing it is because we're so emotionally anchored in the past.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about really being willing inside of fidelity to that future to let go and to just let the universe take care of it. Where many of us get stuck in this is that when we go to ask how we're the source of something, we do it in a way that's shame-based. Some version of what's wrong with me, which, by the way, is a covert form of victimization. Oh, I have very low self-esteem because nobody loved me when I was a child. So I'm victimized by my own psychology. So what we're looking for is the behavioral aspects. How am I showing up in a way that is demonstrating to people or even pulling on people to disrespect me? I speak in disparaging ways, or these are very subtle things that very often are habitual. Like if I speak to you like this, like my name is Katherine, or do you understand what I'm saying? And I'm constantly pulling on you for affirmation. That's a way that I'm communicating that I don't really believe in myself. Or if I'm kind of loud and aggressive and in your face, and because I don't think that you actually want to hear what I have to say, so I have to get really a lot in there and really convince you. That's also communicating that you shouldn't take me too seriously, or it's backing you up. That would be a way of being that from someone who has a core I'm not wanted. They're assuming that nobody wants what you have to offer, so you have to be really aggressive, but it's the aggressiveness that's pushing people away. So it's starting to see all of that. Like, you really, how am I the source? How am I the source of being alone? Well, I isolate, or I'm much more comfortable with being the giver than the receiver. I don't take the risk to be vulnerable very often. Or I avoid conflict like the plague, right? Or I just, I isolate. How am I the source of being invisible? Well, I sit in the back row. I kind of hunch over, I dress down, I don't really raise my hand, I don't share, or I'm hyper focused on the feelings and needs of other people. I go right into overdrive to take care of them. I self-abandon, I don't even know what I'm feeling or needing. So we have to get very clear about how am I actually creating this? Because that's where you can change it. When you isolate it like that, you say, wow, that's what I'm doing. So what's the new practice? What's the deeper truth, by the way? Well, I didn't come here to be invisible. I came here to have an impact. And it's my responsibility to presence myself. So what's the new development? I better try and decipher what I'm feeling, and then learn how to make that transparent to somebody.
Yeah, I think it's a big work in progress. Even though I got Michael, the one. I'm still learning to look inward, and I know, Annie, you're having a lot of experiences that are relative to the book happening now, spinning out.
Yeah, I mean, we had a TBD label on my agreement from a high school friend that was like, I call it a Chandler Monica agreement, like, oh, maybe one day, and he actually ended up walking right past my house the other day, and I was like, hey, Annie, and I was like, hey, and I was like, you want to chat for a minute? And I broke the agreement. And he was so cool about it, and we were both, it was like, and that was such a weird little thing. It didn't even feel like it was really weighing on either of us, but it's there. I think a lot of what we uncovered in the work, and you probably, in your experience, obviously, there's a lot of little things that you realize that you hang on to that are odd or off, or it may not be the agreement with that person exactly, but maybe it's the attitude towards, just in general, like that attitude I was carrying as a young person, that that if I don't find someone by the time I'm 40, I definitely need to settle for just some friend or someone who's doesn't really light me up like that. Not that they're a bad person, but it's a weird cultural teaching we've taken on, I think
it's beautiful what you shared, that you got to see. Well, the thing about agreements is that they serve as intentions that we set.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you want to share what the agreement was?
Oh, it was that, if we're single when we're 40 and we don't have anybody else, maybe
Oh, you made that agreement as a
Yeah.
teenager in high
Yeah.
school.
I mean, it was a flippant thing, and that's why we kind of laughed about it in our in our talking about it because I barely remembered it.
Wow.
But then, but it was still kind of there. Like, oh, well,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I had an ex-boyfriend who I kind of was holding a space for, like, maybe this will work out someday. Send me an email and be like, hey, I've been thinking about you lately. And he was someone I hadn't spoken to in couple years. So there was the option to kind of like ignore it or say, hello, I cannot do this anymore. It has to be over. And that was like a really big significant thing that just showed up. I think it was week 3 after we started
Amazing.
the book that it just
That's amazing.
like we gotta
That's
get
beautiful.
yeah.
I think
Well,
our time trajectory has been different, but we're both still working through after having done it and still seeing the effects of things. I mean, my dog alone is calling in love. I know all of my neighbors now.
oh, that's great.
Just neat. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Well, that we pray for love, we hope for love, we wish for love, but love has to happen through us. So life can only change through the different choices that we make. So what you're both demonstrating is the new ways of showing up in alignment with the future you're committed to. Danielle, where you took that as an opportunity to graduate, to set a boundary, to show up differently than you'd ever shown up before. And Annie, where you took that opportunity to create a new agreement, which is really an agreement to have what lights your heart up.
Yeah.
That's the agreement you made. The new agreement is to be faithful to the possibility of that in such a way that you compel life to bring it to you.
Ooh, it gives me the chills.
Yeah. And we really feel like we couldn't have obviously done it without you, without your words and the Calling in the One book. So we're just eternally grateful for what we've learned from you and for taking the time to speak with us this afternoon. We're really excited to get to meet you and talk to you. And we're running short on time, so I don't want to keep you. I know you have a busy day and many more lives to change.
Thank you.
But if you're ready to sign off, we can. If there's anything else you want to add, you have a website, KatherineWoodwardThomas.com.
KatherineWoodwardThomas.com. And that has information about the 8-week journey where I'm there live with you every week. And there's an online component with coaches every day available. And we also have a callingintheone.com website where you can download a free starter kit. So I'd love to have you taken up advantage of that too. But it was great to be with you both. Thank you so much. Just sending you my love.
Thank you again for your
You're
time.
welcome. You're welcome. Lots of love, everyone. Bye-bye.